Like, sorry, not shopping, but like groceries. Yeah, like shopping. Did you get to have your reading bag? Hello? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Smart Risks. My name is Jennifer Lentfer. I'm the Director of Communications at the newly branded Thousand Currents, and we're so excited to have you all here today. It is a celebration of a book launch, but it's also a real moment for us as an organization because kind of full circle. When I joined Thousand Currents 2 years ago, 2 of the staff had already contributed to the book, as well as 2 board members, and 2 of our partners were actually teachers. So when I said, hey, I would like to join the organization, they said, great, you can write on Monday morning. So what a joyous thing to have my writing and my work be together in the same place, and to really utilize this moment of this book launch to not only talk about our partners, but partner grassroots groups around the world that are doing incredible work and ways that we as an international aid and philanthropy and social enterprise and impact investing and so forth and so on industry can do to really put more force and power behind those efforts. So we're really glad to have you. And I was at a wedding a couple weekends ago, and the groom and bride turned around and did a selfie. And it was sort of cheesy in the moment, but please join me in the cheese. We like cheese a little bit at Thousand Currents. So if you could all stand up and get in my viewfinder. This is happening, everybody. Yes, look. Awesome. 1, 2, 3.
Christy, get out of the way. Sorry.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see so many friendly faces. And I'm really looking forward to a good discussion today with such smart people in the room and people who really do care about how do we get more resources to the ground gathered. So welcome, everybody. We're going to start off today with a little bit of a performance of one of the pieces in the book. I'm going to welcome my colleague, the Director of Latin America Programs at Thousand Currents, Catherine Zavala. And we're going to read The Dissonance, which is written by Nora Murad from the Dali Association. The question to you all as we take on our roles is, what if funders and grassroots organizations in the Global South shared their real thoughts about each other? As a local, I've often found it frustrating to communicate with international NGOs and donors.
As an international, I've often found it frustrating to communicate with local NGOs.
I don't like the idea that I judge them, but I suppose I do. They say they want to support good local organizations in developing contexts, but their ways of thinking and acting are pretty problematic.
I don't like the idea that I judge them, but I suppose I do. They say they want our support, and we dedicate our careers to helping them, but they often make it much harder than it has to be.
Sometimes I think we're worse off with their help than we would be without it.
Sometimes I think we'd accomplish more if we just did the work ourselves.
In not one atypical case, we heard about an international NGO that gives small grants to organizations like ours. On their website, they had a long list of grants to organizations in our country. They even had a note in our language explaining that they like to make personal connections with their grantees. So we sent them an email. They sent back 8 pages of guidelines that were already on their website.
In one not a typical case, a local NGO wrote to me, "We need money." What does need have to do with anything, I thought. There's far more need than we could ever respond to. They should tell me why I should fund them and not another NGO. I sent them our guidelines, which are already on the website. They have only looked. They didn't even thank me.
We gave the guidelines to a local student to translate for us. She did a few pages, but when her brother was seriously injured in the war, she started coming to us less and less. We finally managed to translate the guidelines using the internet, and we wrote our responses and translated them on the internet. Some of the questions didn't make sense, though. We skipped the one about inputs, the one about quantitative indicators, and the one about social return on investment. We had no idea what they were talking
I didn't hear from them for months, and then I got a half proposal. Some of the questions were answered and some weren't, and the English was so poor. Can they get a proofreader so that I get a decent impression of their capacity? I thought.
Months went by, and we didn't hear from the international NGO. They never even acknowledged our proposal. We figured they're like the others. They only get to be friends.
Since I had loads of work, I put their proposal in the order it was received. And when I got to it, there was still enough time for them to get into the next funding round. I sent pages of detailed comments so they could resubmit. Again, no response. Infuriating. They asked me for money and then are non-responsive.
Then we got an email in which they sent back our proposal. Did that mean we were under consideration? We waited. After a long time, we got 2 emails asking if we planned to submit. They came the same day right after our weekend, as if we were supposed to answer when the office was closed. We were confused. Hadn't we already submitted? We called the student we knew to come in to explain what the donor wanted. She couldn't come, but she sent a friend of hers whose English wasn't any better than ours. But then we had luck. There was a foreigner sitting in the cafe outside our office. We asked him to read the emails and explain if our proposal was approved or rejected or still being considered. He said the donor had put comments on our proposal, but the comments weren't visible because our software was too old. So he got the file on his phone. The donor had a comment on every single sentence of our proposal, and not one was about our project, only about the way we explained it. The whole thing was tiring. We really need the money. The war had intensified and no one else was offering the kinds of services we were giving. Didn't she realize how urgent the situation was? We decided to ask her for a meeting since we heard from the other NGOs that she was coming to town, though she herself had not told us. They missed the deadline, and I felt sorry that I had wasted my time. But then I heard from them right before my next trip to the field. They wanted to meet. My schedule was already full with back-to-back meetings, but trying to be a nice person, I added an appointment at 6 p.m. We made us a meeting at 6 p.m. We had to go home to cook, supervise our children's homework, make sure our husbands approved, go back out at night to meet her. She held her meetings in the restaurant of a fancy hotel. We bought us tea and cake, but we would rather have the cash for our programs since it was so overpriced. The woman seemed very interested in our work, but even after we explained everything in detail, she still wanted us to fill out those papers and respond to her comments. It was a good meeting. They were really nice women, and I liked the work they were doing. I wanted to fund them, and I had the money. But even weeks later, I hadn't managed to get them to send the proposal. I sent an email to ask if they planned to submit. I sent another the next day. No response. I finally just filled in the blanks for them and put my reputation on the line to get them preliminary approval from our management team. We only have a few people in the office, and everyone is dealing with war victims, and we hadn't figured out to fill out all those papers. The NGOs thanked me, but I really don't think they realized how much effort I put in on their behalf. But an amazing thing happened. They approved our grant. They just wanted a budget. But in order to get their money, they still needed to prepare the budget. I waited for it and waited for it. The budget guidelines are clear to me and easy, but again, they missed the next funding deadline. Foreigner from that cafe agreed to do it for us again. But then he was called away to another part of the country for his job, and it took him a while to come back. He finally filled out the budget form the way the donor wanted it. I felt like they'd taken advantage of me, and I vowed not to fund them. But when they finally got me their budget, it was fabulous. I pushed through the grant and crossed my fingers that the reporting would be good too. Sadly, it wasn't. When the money came, we used every penny to help the refugees from the war. And even though it was a very small amount of money, no amount of information was good. I spent so much time trying to get better reports from them. I couldn't support as many other local organizations as I wanted to. I even tried to give them extra visibility, giving them the chance to be highlighted in our annual report, on our website, in press releases.
but getting information from them was like pulling teeth.
Donor kept sending emails asking for more and more case studies and articles.
Do they really think we just give money without any accountability? Don't they know that I am being held accountable?
Do they really think we survive just to give them the reports? Don't they know we are trying to meet the increasing needs of our community? And now I'm going to introduce Neda Zodi from the Open Gov Hub, who will be our moderator today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to take a seat. So we're so delighted to be having this Smart Risks book launch here at the Open Gov Hub. The Open Gov Hub was established in late 2012 and is a community of 40 organizations and about 200 people who are all promoting transparency, accountability, and civic participation around the world. And I'm especially delighted that our event today features two of our Rockstar members, if I can say that, to really discuss the clear paradoxes and ironies and challenges that come up in all of our work that was so powerfully just illustrated, I think, in that scenario. I think those of you who are in the room and are familiar with the Open Gov Hub also know that many people here in this community share that passion to kind of do development differently and respond to a lot of these challenges that have been surfaced. So I think today's discussion will especially be very helpful at addressing that. So what I'm going to do first is to kind of give a very quick introduction to the book, just based on my own recent reading, and then introduce Jennifer and Blair and offer them some questions, and then we'll have time for an open discussion as well. But I will say, if any of you have questions about the Open Gov Hub, please feel free to find me or any of our members who are here today to follow up, because we really, as a community, are committed to supporting and enabling the great work that all of these different organizations are doing and trying to find better ways to tackle these problems, and also share resources and collaborate in the process. So with that, I just want to put a couple points that really struck me from even just the introduction to the book to kind of help frame our conversation today. The first thing that I'll say is, if anyone has had a chance to read at least the introduction, you may have had a similar experience to me, which was feeling that there's a couple like profiles of a few different characters that are introduced in the introduction. And to be honest, I felt like some of those profiles were a little bit too real. So consider yourself forewarned. Some of these, experiences, I think you'll probably find really resonate very strongly with a lot of our lived experiences in this work. So, but it's a really powerful way to introduce these conversations. But the book, I think one of the incredible things about it is that it does offer guidance in so many different ways on kind of the who, what, why, and how of supporting local leaders who really understand the solutions that are best for their communities. So I think you'll really find that as a theme throughout our conversation. And one other thing I just want to quickly point out is, even though the topic of the book, has to do with providing these relatively small grants to local leaders, there's, this really important thing that I think bears mentioning right up front, which is that the collaborative that formed to create this book together represents the giving of over $130 million over the last 30 years to 130 different countries, to over 5,000 grassroots organizations, through almost 12,000 different grants. So just want to encourage us all to think also about like the aggregate scale that we're talking about, even if the mechanism looks differently from how some international aid is provided. And then finally, there was just two sentences in the introduction that really struck me that I wanted to just share with us all very quickly. Towards the end of the first chapter, it reads, "What is undeniable to the authors of this book as a result of their decades of service is that most families are not getting by because of sweeping international level policies or major internationally funded programs. Rather, those who survive and thrive do so because of the local efforts of people who organize their communities to extend support and services to families who are not being sufficiently reached by government or international agencies. I think that really helps kind of frame everything that we're talking about today. With that, I'm just going to give quick introductions of biographies of Jennifer and Blair, and then turn it over to some questions for discussion. Oops. Thanks for bearing with the transition. You can hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, so Jennifer, who is this fascinating character who has helped bring this book into the world that we are here with today? So just a little background is that given that her hometown of Bruning, Nebraska has a population of just 248 people, it's no wonder that Jennifer Lentfer found her true calling in accompanying small local organizations to be strong forces for social change. Jennifer has worked with over 300 grassroots organizations in Eastern and Southern Africa over the past decade. In 2010, she created the How Matters blog to help place community-driven initiatives at the forefront of international aid, philanthropy, and social enterprise. And in 2012, she was named one of Foreign Policy Magazine's top 100 women to follow on Twitter, an international do-gooder, so please follow her if you don't already. Jennifer is constantly looking for ways to portray the realities of people's lives, their struggles, their strengths, as well as outsiders' roles and mistakes in impatient silver bullet solutions kind of world. Jennifer has served with a variety of international organizations in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Namibia, and the US, including Oxfam, the Red Cross, UNICEF, Catholic Relief Services, and the Firelight Foundation. With her students at Georgetown in 2014, she published The Development Element, Guidelines for the Future of Communicating About the End of Global Poverty. And she's currently an instructor in strategic communications at the University of Vermont. Her first book, Smart Risks, was co-edited with Tanya Catherine and was published in May 2017. And then immediately beside me, we have Blair Glencore. So just a quick background on Blair, who's one of the contributors to the book. In 2006, Blair found himself on the hot, dusty plains of southern Nepal, talking to young Nepalis about their lives. They explained why a lack of integrity was at the heart of all of their daily challenges, from lack of education and jobs to corruption, and that they did not have the tools to fix these problems. As Blair spent time working with the World Bank and other civil society organizations, listening to young people all around the world, the same themes emerged over and over. Young people collectively want to build accountability in their communities and have great ideas to do so. But they need long-term, creative, flexible support to do so. So in order to do this, Blair set up the Accountability Lab to fill this gap. And as executive director, Blair leads the lab strategy, outreach, and development globally. And spends as much time as he can in Liberia, Nepal, and Pakistan, and increasingly Mali, as I understand. Blair is an Echoing Green Fellow and also a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda on Anti-Corruption. Okay, so now that we have all of that out of the way, first question to kick us off, I'll ask Jennifer first to begin with giving us more of a background on how did this book come to life?
Yeah, so imagine, where do I begin? The book is 5 years in the making, and it depends where we pick up the story that as Netta mentioned, yesterday was the anniversary of HowMatters.org. 7 years. In the first couple years, what started happening as I was writing more about the power and effectiveness of grassroots groups and how we were kind of mucking that up a bit with international aid and philanthropy, increasingly more and more international small grant makers started following the law. And so while I had, of course, our peer group, at the time I was working at a small family foundation in California, while we knew each other, we had some relationships, I started learning about all these other for small family foundations or other initiatives that were really focused on making grants in this way. And what I kind of soon realized as this was happening was, wow, there's a tremendous amount of wisdom and knowledge out there about actually how to get resources to the ground in an effective and responsive way. So what if we collectivized that? And at the time, I was a learning and evaluation. I was really all about that, and I wanted us to learn together. So we created this writing collaborative, which Blair was a part of. I pitched it to everyone I knew and just said, let's write. Oftentimes, international small grant makers don't have mega budgets. They don't have huge amounts of staff. So they're not getting invited to the table to talk about these issues. But yet they still had something to offer, and just getting together was so delightful. So we wrote essays, and then we edited each other's essays. There was sort of small this writing collective, and all of a sudden we realized we had about 40,000 words, so maybe we should write a book. But at the same time, think about 5 years ago, this was like Philanto capitalism hit hard, or venture philanthropy. And all of us, and so the idea was, we were talking about risks all the time, taking more risks. And we often heard as small grant makers, oh, those grassroots groups, they'll just abscond with the money, right? Like this was considered a huge risk. And to us, it was actually not a risk. It was the least risky thing you could actually do. So we just wanted to kind of, at the same time as we were getting excited about learning from each other, we also wanted to create a counter narrative, frankly, to kind of some of those, the big headlines around aid at the time. As we progressed and eventually got the book deal, there were moments when I personally, as Tanya, as co-editors, thought, is it too old? Has the conversation moved on? And every time we checked that little marker, it hadn't. So we still felt like the book was important. And I've actually written about whether we would change the framing. As authors, we totally disagreed on the subtitle. We don't want to be considered small. In fact, it's not small. It depends on what scale you're looking for, what level you're looking for. And we'll talk more about the things we really want to emphasize from the book at the discussion. But that's how it kind of came about.
Yeah, and Blair, if you could share too with your experience kind of becoming part of this process, and especially maybe coming more from the perspective of implementing programs that are meant to facilitate this kind of class.
Yes, thank you. And first of all, congratulations to Jennifer for an amazing book. I imagine many of you haven't had the chance to read it yet, but I think it's for sale. And there's just a wealth of really practical information in there about how to do philanthropy differently, about how to support people that are creating meaningful change in different places, and build a movement around doing development a bit differently and hopefully more effectively. And that's what drew me to this in the first place. As Nana mentioned, used to work in the aid system in different ways, and had seen some of the problems with that. There's a danger that this becomes a little bit of a donor bashing session, which absolutely isn't.
Which has also happened here before, I will say.
Which it isn't at all. There's a lot that bigger donors do very well. There's a lot of very good people within those systems, but there are some structural difficulties and deficiencies that prevent some good things from happening, and I saw many of those in my role in some of those organizations, and talking to young people in particular about this, really getting the sense that they were frustrated, as was brought out in that story at the beginning, that they couldn't tap into some of these resources, they couldn't connect with the right people, they couldn't find the ways to build the sorts of movements that they wanted, and that's sort of where the Accountability Lab came from, and also why I was so interested in the Small is Big writing collaborative. And what was great about it, as Jennifer pointed out, is that it was collaborative. It was about sharing ideas, editing each other's essays, making this a collective process. And in that way, lots of other things have come out of this for us, which has been fantastic. Not only have we got a great book that hopefully will inform the way that people practice these things. At least one of the other co-authors came onto our board and has been a huge help from the beginning of this process in helping us grow our organization. We've collaborated with a number of the other organizations in this book in different places. So it's a community as much as it is a written output, which I think is really, really important. And I think from here, there's a lot more that could be done with it.
So would love to hear from you both in explaining basically what exactly is a smart risk and how is it different from how a lot of us may argue about.
In its nebulous definition, a smart risk is investing relatively small amounts of funds in effective grassroots leaders, whether that be in a movement setting or a civil society setting, or even an individual setting. We really, though, when we thought about smart risk for us, we really wanted to highlight a couple things. One, because we didn't think it was so risky and wanted to kind of counterbalance that. But we wanted to really highlight that ultimately a smart risk is being responsive to what is already existing on the ground. So one of the big fallacies and frankly killer assumptions that has plagued the aid industry for decades now is the idea that there's a blank canvas upon which our intervention will just make everything better. And this is really trying to say, listen, people are organized and doing something about whatever issue they're concerned about in their community. So what if our role changes and we not become the experts and the solvers, but in fact are supporters and the funders and the unleashers, right? Really help those grow and change. We really want to really emphasize building on existing efforts is our bottom line. That is ultimately what a smart risk is. It's not even if an initiative is starting from scratch. You're working with existing players who are building on social capital and the ingenuity and the determination that literally exists everywhere. And now, because we're at this moment in our own political development, shall we say, in our country, it is a moment for all of us to recognize that locally and globally, and sure we not.
A couple of other points that come out in the book, I think, and that certainly are a big part of what we do at the Accountability Lab. One is understanding context, but also really working hard to build trust with the people that have the good ideas that are trying to change their societies, which comes through repeated interactions. It comes through following through on your commitments. It comes through spending a lot of time listening, which should be a starting point, of course, for everything. And that's what we try and do. And I hope that's what helps inform our approach in a way that makes it a bit more meaningful. A second point is that for us, it's also about individuals, not necessarily organizations. So we have an incubator that supports young people with good ideas for accountability and open governance. And we realized that it's all about individuals because the best ideas are wonderful, but if they're not driven by someone or a group of people that can come together to push it forward, then not very much happens. If we can focus on individuals who can catalyze change and who over time will move into different positions and at different moments have the opportunity to capitalize on the opportunity, the space for change, then that is something that we could, I think we can help to happen, and is a long-term approach that doesn't take huge amounts of resources. And the third piece, I think, is that something that also comes out through the book is monetary resources, of course, are not necessarily the most valuable resources. And a big piece of what we talk about through our incubator too is that there are many other types of resources, human networks, ideas, all sorts of other types of resources that we can bring to bear that could help you do what you need to do. And we've done a few impact assessments of our work now, and almost unanimously from the people coming through our incubator, the feedback is when we ask what is the most valuable piece of what we provide, it's not the money, because we don't have very much money, and there's a lot you can do without huge amounts of financial resources. It's the networks, it's the communities, it's the ideas and the ways that hopefully we can help people come together to solve their collective problems.
I think both of your points in different ways touch on this whole notion of kind of rethinking capacity building. I really like that comes through very much in this book. I just want to push back for a little bit because, the book definitely encourages people to move away from these prescriptive approaches to, we know the solution, now just take it and implement it, and to taking a much more flexible approach. But doesn't it feel good to be prescriptive sometimes? Like when you, let's say you're working for some kind of international organization, you've seen a context that feels similar and a process that has somehow worked. How would you advise feeling in those scenarios, especially, for those of us who may be in international organizations who feel like we might want to have something to offer, but not in a way that kind of overrides the local capacity and wisdom and solutions that are already.
I think there are a number of personal and institutional barriers to working in this way. And I don't want to, part of what we've always had in our discussion is we are not such evangelists that we're saying this is the only way to fund and support grassroots groups and movements. This is the only way change is going to happen. What we observe as we look at the industry as a whole, however, is that the proportions are off. The proportions of how the money gets distributed is off. It is off. And I was just watching actually on Twitter this morning, the Kenya Community Development Foundation, which is a community grant maker, they were celebrating 20 years today, right? And they said 0.5% of funds actually gets to grassroots. Now, I don't know but we do realize it is minuscule and it has so much room for it. So we are not retooling everybody tomorrow. We're very clear about that. What we hope that the book can do is kind of offer some ideas to take back. When we talk about building trust, everybody's in a partnership now, right? None of us are doing this work alone, but how do we create more trust-filled, respectful partnerships? Like there's lessons you can learn from this modality of grant making that would be lessons that do the old way. I global health here who are like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta freaking replicate things. Vaccines? Hell yeah. You just want to get that out there, right? There's some things that can be mechanized, but we cannot think about international aid in the same way because our world is changing. We have to change. We realize that looking at service delivery, turning out the widgets, is kind of what got us here, right? So we know we need to rebuild a new world, and if we keep doing things the way we did before, we're just not get there. So what we hope is that this book offers examples in humility for that personal transformation that needs to start happening with all of us, as well as I have one end. So when I started working for a large international fair, at the time there was still some private money. We still weren't 100% beholden to USAID, and so from this little core group of money, we could make one basically 2-day grant. The nun might know which talking about. The nun could come to the front door and write a one-page proposal and get $1,000. And I'm telling you, my colleagues still refer to those grants as some of the most fun, most impactful, the most memorable stuff they did, even though they were working on mega projects. So I ask big questions like, can we have diversified facilities? Can we ask organizations about that? The way. One thing
and Blair, same question, especially if you can reflect maybe a bit on the lab's experience, both working in South Asia but also West Africa. Like, how do you make sure that you are really respecting local context, but also providing something that can?
It's a great question, and it's a very difficult process. There's no assumption that this is in any way easy. And part of it, I hope, with us is that we have an adaptive learning mindset. there are many people in this room that work a lot on learning and how you can integrate that into your work. And we take that really seriously as an organization and really hope that it infuses what we do from top to bottom, so that if we receive feedback that things aren't quite working the way they should, we can work with our partners, with the organizations that are creating the change, to understand how we can support them better from every aspect of what we do. The other is, of course, that we do take a very community-based approach. We are registered locally in all of the places that we work. We are very careful about who we bring into the organisation as staff and volunteers, the connections and networks that they have, the people that they can mobilise, the relationships that they have with communities and how they might be perceived. To hopefully, and again, it's always imperfect, but at least begin to try and make sure that we are sensitive to those things, that we can listen in the right sorts of ways, that our work will be perceived as legitimate, and that we can hopefully build trust through that. The other bit that relates to the point about scale, and that being somewhat prescriptive, is that frustrates me a little bit. We're sort of at the intersection of accountability and social enterprise, and certainly in the kind of social enterprise world, there is a huge emphasis on how many people can you reach, how many products can you produce, how many million people can you save, and what about if we thought about scale in different ways? Scale, and this is actually a little box hidden away in the book written by Jennifer that I thought was one of the amazing of many nuggets about understanding how you can think about scale as connections made, networks built, influence on policy, those kinds of things, which is more of the way that we're hoping to think about it. And in a way, of course, that isn't prescriptive. It's about understanding the context and working from there.
Both of you have also alluded to the experiences that you've had at various types of development institutions that maybe are not currently taking this approach. So I'm wondering if you can just briefly reflect on kind of what lessons do you think the book can offer to funders who don't, or maybe even can't, in the present day, operate in this setting? How can we kind of start to move the industry, as you said, Jennifer, towards a more balanced approach?
Sure.
Easy questions.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the discussion because there are many more people in this room that know a lot about this as well. I think there is a shift in the right direction, actually. I'd be interested to hear Jennifer's perspective on that. Donors are trying hard to be more flexible. They are more adaptive. I think there is, perhaps not quite as much amongst government donors, but certainly amongst private foundations, a lot more emphasis on being flexible, on longer term support, all of those sorts of things. Although there are many initiatives coming out of donor organizations like the CLA at USAID, DFID has something similar. Some of the bigger NGOs, Mercy Corps and International Rescue Committee, are thinking about these sorts of approaches, adaptive learning type ways of doing things. And so I think things are changing. The question is how much of that is actually happening on the ground, and how much of it is conversations in places like this. And sadly, in the places that we work, I still see not huge amounts of changes in practical support for organizations. So understanding sort of how to make sure that the policy discussions filter down to practice is obviously something that's ongoing. I think there's also a better understanding now that there are moments that change can happen, and that we need to be ready to seize those moments, both when they happen, but also before they happen. And we're having a number of conversations now with some very forward-minded donors about how that could happen. Of course, if you're working in fragile contexts, it's often a little bit pointless to have longer-term plans and then for things to change very quickly because of the political or security or environmental conditions. And so, how can we make sure that the frameworks are in place to make philanthropy and support to responses quicker, more flexible, and more effective? The third thing I think that I mentioned is the transparency piece. There is a lot more emphasis now on the transparency of philanthropy and of support to local organisations, both on the giving side, but also on the receiving side. At the Accountability Lab, we have an app on our website that has all of our information in there, financial information in there in real time, so you can check what we're earning, what we're spending, where the money is coming from, where it's going, because we want to try and set an example in that way. And I think if we could even more so begin to crack open the transparency piece within philanthropy, that would do a lot to help both the trust and the credibility and the transparency and accountability, but also the collaboration to make sure that we can coordinate better, because at the moment it's very difficult to know who's doing what where, of course, and there's a lot more on that side of things that can be done.
One of the trends that I do see is that there's a growing recognition that you can't just keep funding the usual players and think that things will change. We've got to get out of the capital cities. We've got to engage with people around the table that don't look like us. That's coming slowly. One of the as Thousand Currents was creating our strategic plan 3 years ago, our third the grantee said to us, okay, thanks, grants, for support, it's long term, it's great, very useful capital. No one else is doing it, so what are you going to do? And it literally put an advocacy agenda on us to say, go to the other donors in your country and kind of create more dialogue around this, have conversation. And so one of the things that kind of developed out of that for us is something called the Thousand Currents. The fourth one will be taking place here on the East Coast in September. And in that process, we actually invite people to come and learn about our model, our process, what we can offer by just kind of putting other people in the driver's seat. So our grantees actually from Global South actually come in our training. We learn about humility in a applied way, but then actually take that and say, well, then how do our practices have to change? How does our reporting have to change? How does our due diligence? I will say the other thing that hasn't changed enough for me yet is core support and operating support. No strings attached, nothing in which there's actual belief. The organization receiving it knows how to spend it because they know what they're up to. Okay? I will say I'm an evangelist. I do think that there's much more room for us to fight for that flexibility with our donors so that we can offer that to our grantees, what we've done over the years. We've literally retooled the way our funding comes in so that we can offer funding in that way. And it is transformative. It allows, why shouldn't people be able to pay the lights or hire a new staff person or start a new program based on what the needs of the community are at that point. So we'll keep fighting for that.
Cool. So before we open it up, because I know there's quite a lot of wisdom in this room, as Blair has mentioned, just want to ask, I'd like to ask 2 questions, but maybe I'll give you the option to answer either one. Okay, no, I'll bring it down to one. So at the end of the day, it's the question is, what is hardest about taking this approach and running with it for you at an individual level? And the reason I ask this is something that really struck me from the book, even if you just look at the powerful, compelling questions that each chapter is kind of structured around, it really forces you to think not just at this institutional level, but again, at the individual level. What are some of the barriers that we might be bringing to this work that's preventing us from hearing the solution? So I just want to kind of give you a chance to share just a quick reflection. What at a very individual level, how, what do you think is the biggest challenge you face that kind of really embracing it?
I'm white. I'm from the middle, and that's a big one. I also personally, I'm kind of a know-it-all. Just am. To tell you the truth, my friend. So we are the fifth sponsor of Black Lives Matter, and so when I heard of BLM with my best friend, and here's that Bureau of Land Management, and he's like, I can tell I'm from the West because at Bureau of Land Management, and I said, well, I'm a farmer, and you don't know other accents. I don't know where that comes from, but I'm sure that has shown up in a partnership meeting before. So I do think that there's not one hurdle. There's a bazillion hurdles. We all bring our own prejudice, biases, experiences to the table. All of us have stuff to get over. Every single one of us. And so having that trust allows the feedback to happen. Without it, you're never going to hear back. You're never going to hear the truth about your bad or good behavior. So I think just by creating relationships in a smart risk way, hopefully you get more fodder for your own growth.
It's a great question, and as Jennifer said, there's a million different things. One big one that we struggle with a little bit is we're supporting individuals, not necessarily organizations, but we are also helping them where they need it to build sort of structures and to connect them in ways that will help them grow their ideas because they're meaningful and important ideas. But one question that crosses my mind often is, are we perpetuating some of the system that we are trying to change in that way? It's not always international funding. We're helping them develop revenue streams where that's feasible, although for the kind of things that they're working on with us, accountability and open government and so on, it's a bit more difficult to find those kinds of revenue streams. So that's a dilemma, and it's a difficult line to tread, and we're trying to think about it meaningfully and carefully to make sure that we're not just creating more NGOs that are feeding the system that might not be working properly. A second point is, of course, related to Jennifer's about the finances and the core support. And we're 5 years old. We are working as hard as we possibly can in difficult places. And I still, a couple of months ago, had to put all of our payroll on my credit card because we there just isn't core support, or even when you get grants, they're delayed. It's a cash flow issue. There's it's very difficult, even I think where you're relatively well established, or you're trying to do things in meaningful ways to build the support that you need to really get stuff kind of going and to grow over time. So it's it can still be difficult. It's not just a startup thing. It takes a long time.
Good. Would love to have some questions from folks in the room. If you could just introduce yourself and provide a question. Yeah. Okay.
Are you allowed to advise also?
Sure.
Yeah. My name is Madani. I'm from Nepal, professor of American Military University there. I really appreciate what you guys do. And when I went to Nepal and ED owned the Nepal one, so they produced great positive life. Regarding the funding and everything, I also run NGO. So from here, all over the country, because we have open democracy and continue to support. Please reach out to the guy. For example, if you want to do wonders to South Africa, West Africa, Nepal. For example, I lead 300,000 people here. I'm the president of the organization. So we don't like corruption. Because of the corruption happening here. But my whole heart and soul is there. So please reach out to the corresponding diaspora. If you need a statistic, anything, without a statistic, they have the valid information about it. So we will channel that to the good governance and transparency. I think for people from here from Nepal, because to knowing that and job in. So the best way to reach out to the diaspora, for example, because we are here and we like to advocate. Yes, disease in the world is they kill more people than bullet.
And Thousand Currents does have an app program that's great enough because there's so much power in the connection and the collaboration across borders. Other questions?
Hi, my name is Dennis. I work for a grant, but I'm just curious who you see as representatives of the stakeholders.
Yeah, who's setting the agenda? In philanthropy, it really depends on which issue area you're talking about. So, corruption, transparency, you've got national society. It's global health, it's Gates, the end. If it's, for various issues, it's different people. I think the book actually has various sectors, various issues that are addressed, all using this approach. So in Blair's case, it's addressing accountability in Liberia and his chapter. But we've got health, we've got community, just community economic development. But whatever the issue is, you can kind of take from some of the lessons and hopefully apply. In our we really want the sector as a whole to hopefully understand and get some insights where we're coming from. I think you spoke a little bit about the word small, right? I would love to hear about, you said it was debate of, and again, as somebody who was on around and think with the data small become big, and how small is small. And also just flipping through the book, I haven't read it yet. I think whether it's a small donor or a big donor or a small grantee or a big grantee, however we find that on a scale, I think has less productivity, national, local, development, or anywhere, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And two, if you have any thoughts on how magnify. So the range of, so we as Nana mentioned, the collective has made over 12,000 grants in 30 years, and the upper range of what our working definition of small was when we came together was about 25,000 US tax. That's starting at 500, and so it's a real range, as you're saying. What is small? Small is big. It really is a range. It really, part of what we discuss as small grant makers is what is the right scale for what the initiative is, and that being part of the due diligence and part of the decision. It's not just saying we make $500,000 grants tomorrow. It's saying what's actually needed for the situation. One of the chapters actually by Caitlin Stanton from the Urgent Action Fund begs the question of, is our definition of small too small? So what about 50, 75, 100,000 for the next middle range? And do we underfund people with our small? I mean, these are the questions we're asking ourselves. So I totally appreciate that question, and I think it's one to continue to ask ourselves. Really, it's fun. Yes, please hashtag smart risks. Give it as Christmas gifts to your annoying boss. Really get it out. Help us get it out there, because this is a grassroots effort. The book, and just this is not. Simon & Schuster didn't publish next one, but it was published by a development publisher. So those of the colleagues you have, please just keep it around and get the word out. And we will this summer be pitching a blog series to some publications. We know that some of them are a little still wonky, and some of them are, like we performed today, are very interactive. So we're trying to also find and match the chapters with their audiences as well. So that's kind of our next phase after we launch the book as a whole. We're also going to put it back into pieces and find homes for it. So please, if you have outlets or connections for us, or people might like to hear some of these narratives.
I haven't seen it for months. and I have to say quickly too, I think another reason to plug this really is that it's such an obviously common sense approach, and many of us here at the Hub have conversations very often about how do we bring the relevance to our work? How do we translate the very important principles of transparency and accountability and all these nice things that live often at a very, very high level and connect them to the kind of headline issues or the kitchen table issues. I heard someone say that recently that I really like, that families and communities are actually dealing with, and how do we acknowledge and see the solutions that they already have. So I have to say, I think, this is a book not only for your colleagues and your boss, but maybe for your mom and your cousin, and et cetera, the people who maybe don't quite understand why you're so passionate about the work that you might do, and help translate those.
That's a very good point. The church ladies who now have a little donor circle were still in the back of our minds when we put this together, because you don't need to build an orphanage. You know that. They need to think about what's already existing on the ground and how do we support it, right? So, yes, thank you. I do hope grandmas everywhere. I told my grandma what page she was on so she could skip ahead a little bit. Because some chapters are more dense than others, but that's the joy of a collective in multiple ways.
Just around that, yeah, I think it's not about the size, because size is relative. It's about the approach, and the book is fantastic in pulling out all of the reasons why and examples of flexibility and long-term support and really contextualized, community-based approaches are an important thing for donors and other people that are trying to support change think about. And that could be donors of all sizes.
Hi, I'm Mark Gunther. I'm a reporter who writes about I'm going to speak up. So first, Jennifer, who are the funders who support groups like Thousand Currents, who are state foundations? Credit. Question one. Question two. This feels like a very labor-intensive form grant. Is it legitimate to say sort of what's overhead ratio or some equivalent way of what cost X amount of fund out for? And the last question related to the first two, what do you think of taking this to the next level, doing direct transfers one at a time, directly does ultimately trusting in ability?
Right. So the donors we are funded by many other family foundations, but our big donors that I will give a lot of credit to are the Nobu Foundation, the Foundation for Just Society, the Libra Foundation, Libra, as in horoscope. Yeah, that's a good start, and I think we have cultivated relationships over time with them that allow, as I said, us to be able to make the kinds of grants that we make as well. That didn't happen overnight. So I always tell Larry, keep going. It really does take time to develop that trust, but it's possible. Second question, one of the most common questions we actually do get about small grants and apt criticism, it costs me just as much, like for my internal costs, telephone staff, whatever, to make a $5,000 grant as it does to make a $500,000. Yes, and I don't think it'd be wise of us to deny that that's true. What we tend to say is, one, it's worth it for us because of the level of impact we're seeing. Well, we can actually practice stuff over time. We're not an in-and-out donor. It allows us to really kind of tell some long-term stories, and that's worth it to us. And when you do more long-term relationships like we do, that investment in due diligence is upfront, and then the maintenance is a bit smaller. So yeah, I wonder sometimes about what is the other cost, the cost that isn't financial, the cost of sort of wasted funds from bureaucratically spent funds, shall we say, where very little actually gets to the ground of that $500,000 grant. Maybe 5,000 gets in the community's hand, right? So we acknowledge that every layer takes their time, essentially. I don't know if you want to add anything. And would you say the last question, Mark?
Direct.
Oh, yes. what did someone say to me at Give Directly the other day? Oh, yeah, it's nice when you have like a pocket of money, one thing in one space. And there is real questions about the level of scale that you have possible with that as well. Because if you actually look at their model, it's very focused, very small, that they're really good at getting to you. But at the same time, I don't take issue with it. I think it's one of the things. Crash transfers is one of the modalities that a large organizations, especially humanitarian relief, are looking at right now. So it is one of the things that was criticized early on in aid, and now we've come back to it. And so that's an interesting thing to kind of observe over the years. But yeah, again, this is one of those things where it's not that this is the modality, it's that we've got to have a complementary set of approaches that kind of allows for more of those grassroots approaches.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points, Mark. Good questions. On Give Directly, I imagine you know a lot more about it than I do, but my sense is that some of the evidence shows that it is effective, I think, but I would argue maybe dealing with the symptoms rather than the causes of some of the problems. So people might use that money wisely, but to what extent is it beginning to change some of the systems that are actually causing these problems? And I would argue accountability and that piece of it is something that it wouldn't address. And so there still needs to be other pieces, of course.
It's still based on a bootstrap.
Right. And on the small grants and the kind of admin and overheads associated with that, someone was telling me the other day that there's one large foundation that they worked out spends about $125,000 to find and then give each grant, find the organizations and then give the grants to those organizations. So whether that's money well spent or not, that 125,000, if you're giving it in $5,000 or $10,000 chunks to other organizations to do really good stuff, is another way of doing it. And I think it's not that they're mutually exclusive. You can do both. But I think the key, and this is really a big piece of what we're working on, is that if you gave all of those small grants separately to very disparate organizations, and they may or may not individually be good, and the work may or may not be effective, but if they're not connected, if they're not adding up to more than the sum of their parts, then it needs to be questioned. So we're placing a lot of emphasis on ecosystem building, bringing people together and making sure they know each other, that they're collectively shifting the way that things are done together, and not just piecemeal. And the kind of donors that support us that are really great are Humanity United, Open Society Foundation, Open Road Alliance, Tecovas Foundation. Open Road is really interesting because they specifically focus on helping organizations overcome unexpected challenges, and are very quick and responsive in relation to that. So some really good people.
One more question or comment. Sorry, Kathy, go ahead. Maybe I'll just add to that because I think the word labor intensive kind of struck me, and it's interesting because I think the other part, which I don't know, is uplifted in the book, is to really make this work relationship based. So what I mean by that is that yes, it is labor intensive. Any relationship are in takes a lot of work, but that's what makes it transformational as opposed to transactional. So we're trying to get away from grant making being transactional, but really being like, what are we trying to change together? Like, I'm in this work not because I want to support others, do the social change, but that social change is going to benefit me, my family, my community. So it and the long term part of the grant making really allows us to accompany organizations that go highs and lows, right? So they're not always going on this big high level. There will be moments when they're really really struggling, but I think to see them like is resilient in that process, but transforms
fun part.
Final.
Let's.
Oh, yeah, okay. Hi. I'm a fundraiser, and it was just in the first people giving they feel our motive And, you know, we all know. And they just did data again saying that actually, what you guys are empowering people how to take it on. And I just wonder how to get more of great out like the lower if on this is dollar. Wondering about still have to take money for further along.
Mm-hmm. But, that's my job. That's literally what I have to think about all day long as the director of communications. And at least for Thousand Currents, all of you are now part of our community, whether you like it or not. You signed up, you know where to find it. We literally like want to like create that kind of sense of togetherness in this work. Yes, you can. I can get some clicks. I can figure out how to get some clicks. But we don't. What they never tell you about that money is how. And I haven't seen this latest data. I'm really excited to see it. Is the longevity of that donor relationship with that organization. So if it's a one-off for that little campaign, that's not the kind of donor we're looking for. We want people to have an opportunity to have a political education along with what our grantees are doing in Guatemala, right? Like they're talking about how do we create a better life together. So we're having those conversations in our community too. That's literally what we want to kind of create. There are opportunity costs because we're not doing that kind of fundraising. But we actually have a tremendous growth rate right now without it because we've built relationships over time. And I think that's what the analysts don't look at. Like literally changing that will have some pain periods. I used to work big NGOs and I would tell there will be pain periods, especially because there's massive generational differences as well, which we need to talk about it. Because we're still sending the give letter to grandma, and she's still sending. And we know we have the millennials. They're like, oh, boom, done, and no loyalty. So we've got to figure out that arc differently. We want you to be on the journey with us, and so that's what our invitation is. Our invitation is not to solve something tomorrow. Our invitation is stand with grassroots leaders where the solutions are coming from. This is where we can all learn together.
I think that's a great way to end it. Not much to add, except that we're also definitely trying to tell stories in new ways about the people that we're supporting. You know, it's their work, it's their energy and commitment and resilience that is what's changing things. And as much as we can spread the word about that in different ways, the better. And we're always trying to think of new ways to do that. We'd love to hear from any of you that have creative tools. One thing that we do, for example, is quarterly learning calls, which are a bit like quarterly earnings calls for companies. So public calls, anyone can dial in from anywhere and listen to one of the people that we're working with talk about their challenges, their successes, what they find difficult, what they're changing about what they do based on that. And that gives them exposure. It helps us, spread the word. So that kind of thing. It's not necessarily revolutionary, but it's trying to tell stories in different ways. And I'd be remiss quickly if I didn't point out Basanta, who is sitting here, who's coming through our incubator in Nepal. And if you're talking about people doing a lot with a little and really transforming the way the development happens in a particular place, Basanta is the person to talk to. His organization is engaging hundreds of thousands of people around accountability and civic participation, and with very, very little, and building partnerships to get pro bono support, and just a fantastic example of someone that is living by the principles that are outlined in the book. Well done, Basanta.
We want the readers of this book to say, and what if you have more? What if you want? That's it.
Exactly.
Jennifer, I just want to check in before we move to the reception if we wanted to do another short excerpt reading or just.
We're a bit late, and we don't. Who's ready? It looks like we're almost there. So,
then I'll just, if you want to join me in thanking Blair and Jennifer, and then I'll turn it to you. Please carry us
yes.
into the celebratory closing.
Thank you, Netta. Thank you, Blair. Thank you, Catherine. Thanks all of you for being here. Now is the real celebratory part. And in a little, you have my friend Lauren there sitting at the table to help purchase books. I'll sit and sign and send you messages of love in there. I know which page to sign. And please help yourselves to food and drink. We'll have a toast in a few minutes. And you are all welcome. It is so wonderful to see you. And thank you.
Thank you.